Every big gaming publisher has spent the past decade chasing similar dreams, where exclusives didn't matter, live service games would print money forever, and bigger budgets automatically meant bigger payouts. That dream, however, is collapsing in real time, and none of the big three, whether it's Nintendo, Sony, or Xbox, they are all having something in common that players are frustrated with all three of them. Everyone is catching hands today. As you know, Nintendo had their big showcase recently. They announced Ocarina of Time remake, which got leaked a while back, and now we know that it's true. They also announced Switch 2 versions for the entire Xenoblade Chronicles trilogy and stuff like Final Fantasy Resonance, which is coming to everything. But either way, the further you look into what Nintendo announced, the more people did start asking, okay, but where are the new games? Don't get me wrong, there are still some, more than the other ones at least. And I mean, if we do compare what Nintendo is doing from a first-party perspective against, say, Sony or Microsoft, I mean, it's not even close. Sony has barely any exclusive games on the PS5 that aren't available elsewhere already, and Xbox, which also had their showcase, confirmed that one of the only games strangely still exclusive to them is Gears of War E-Day, and apparently as seen here from Eurogamer, Xbox denies that they made that game Xbox exclusive last minute, yet you can see in this image here from the podcast that Xbox did recently on the right there, that E-Day confirms that it actually was for PS5, so yeah, they did actually remove it last minute. Either way, the reason I bring this up is Xbox and Sony seem to be in this eternal war for exclusives and what to release and not to on other places, and then there's Nintendo who's doing their own thing. Lots of games got announced from Nintendo. Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, that'll be a big seller. They also announced Xenoblade Genesis, a prequel to this series, which will also be a big seller. Updates to games like Pocopia, and like I said before, Switch 2 versions of even more Xenoblade games, which will cost you at least $10 per upgrade. As Nintendo doesn't do these upgrades for free, I guess, but what a lot of people online are complaining about with the Nintendo, and really, this also ties into Sony and Xbox too, is that there's a lot of remasters, remakes, ports, and not as many new games. Well, why is that? Looking at Nintendo's newest showcase, you had Devil May Cry 5, Stellar Blade, Dragon's Dogma 2, Lies of P, and even remasters of older games like Muramasa Revenant Blades, which, if I recall, wasn't that originally a game on PS2 that then got ported to Vita called Rebirth, I think at one point? I could be wrong. Despite games like this being remastered like crazy or ported, Nintendo is still putting their competitors to shame when it still comes to exclusive content. Like I said, Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave is going to sell a lot, and the reality is that neither Xbox or Sony really has any answer to a game like that. Nintendo is also getting an exclusive From Software game in the Duskbloods, which is another big loss for everybody else, because From Software seemed to be done with exclusive games, yet here we are with another game that nobody but Nintendo fans will be getting, at least so far anyways. Even games like Kingdom Hearts 4 have been confirmed for Nintendo's current hardware, and the original trilogy of Kingdom Hearts games are also coming to Switch 2 as well. I'm not complaining either way, right? I own a PS5 and a Switch 2. It's not like I don't have access to any of these games, I do. But the point is still going to stand that someone who primarily plays on PS5 like me, whenever I watch a Nintendo Direct, I kind of just look at my PS5 and then I just sigh really loudly. Because it frustrates me how Sony just can't seem to release much of anything on a timely manner anymore when it comes to first-party releases. Yet, here's Nintendo with their Switch 2 that is only a year old so far, and it's already basically having more exclusives in a single year than Sony has had for the PS5 in 6 years. Okay, currently Nintendo has 11 exclusive titles for the Switch 2 in its first full year. From Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Pocopia, and more. If you go over to the PS5, dude, is it bleak. For a console that is 6 years old already, the PS5 has Demon's Souls Remake, Astrobot, and Ghost of Yotei. Besides that, pretty much everything else, from Spider-Man 2, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, God of War Ragnarok, which is cross-gen, but even then, right, and more, they're all available on PC as well. 6 years, guys. We have 3 games exclusive to the PS5. That's pathetic if you ask me. And one of those isn't even a new game, it's a remake of a PS3 game. I mean, Xbox is kind of in the same boat as Sony. Since the Halo Campaign Evolved game coming out soon isn't just for Xbox either, that game is coming to PS5. And I would wager at some point it's going to come to Switch 2 before long. I think Xbox's only exclusives right now that I can think of, if anyone cares, I guess, is about what, Gears of War E-Day and Clockwork Revolution. Everything else, I think, is cross-gen. Even Final Fantasy VII Revelation, which is the final game in that remake trilogy, has completely abandoned its exclusivity to the PS5, after when Rebirth launched to lackluster sales being tied to only that platform. So I have to ask, what's going on then? Is Sony losing their edge, or is Nintendo just firing on all cylinders? I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. And look, you can't call me a fanboy on any of this, right? I own the consoles, I play the games, I am criticizing everybody in this video. Like I said, these hands are rated variety for everyone. That being said, as someone who primarily plays on PS5, I gotta be real guys, I am frustrated with that console. The PS3 and PS4 generations felt like Sony actually knew what their fans wanted. The PS5 is easily, in my opinion, the worst generation of Sony first-party games and offers ever conceived in the history of that company. Okay, maybe the Vita comes close too, but you may be saying that's hyperbole, but is it really? I mean, the PS1 back in the day was legendary with its exclusives. Final Fantasy games, Ridge Racer, Gran Turismo. If you ask Google itself, the number of exclusive games at the time for the original PlayStation, it ranged somewhere in the hundreds of titles to almost 1,000 plus range, which is absurd. The PS2 had something around the same. And as these consoles kept releasing, Sony's exclusives became less and less until now with the PS5, we're like down to about 3 or so. Which that's crazy, right? To go from hundreds of titles to that, but that's where we're at. It's why it's frustrating, because when I look at Nintendo, they seem to have no problem making exclusive games seemingly all of the time. Yet despite this, Nintendo stock as seen here has dropped about 8% either way following the latest showcase. Why is that? Simple. Too many remasters being showcased, not enough new games still. It probably doesn't help either. As Video Games Chronicle reported here in May that Nintendo raised the prices of the Switch 2 in the US and other regions already. This is not unique to them, I know that. Everybody's charging more, Sony and Xbox included, but when you look at the overall state of the current generation or next gen, however you want to call it, okay, the answer becomes clear. People are paying more for less, and the reasons to own said hardware feels less important now than it ever has for pretty much the most part. While justifying their price hike, Nintendo, as seen here, apologized to both the fans and shareholders, saying that it was necessary to do. But it kinda just feels like no matter which console you're playing on from the big three, it feels like we're just not getting as many new experiences as we like. Well, more so on PlayStation and Xbox at least. Because again, they're remaking Ocarina of Time over there, which I'm sure will sell well. It's a game many believe is one of the best games of all time, and that's not really the issue here for me. It's mostly just that companies are increasingly going back to remakes and remasters to plug the dead air, so to speak, between the new major releases now. That's the only thing that really makes sense to me. You need stuff to come out to keep engagement going for your console, and for Nintendo, it's likely just far easier to remake an older game because it's the best of both worlds. One, because the game's entire experience is already defined. There's no beta testing whether this or that will work, so you make it look nicer, but generally speaking, it's still the same game. This also ties into another convenient thing for companies. Older games are obviously usually anyway smaller than newer games in terms of scope. Duh, I know. Yeah, Ocarina may have been huge to you as a kid, but if you were to actually look at it and compare it to say Breath of the Wild even, you'd be realizing just how much smaller Ocarina was. But again, that makes sense. It's an older game. But you all can also, and this is key, charge full price for it either way, right? So you get a new game for your console, you get people who loved it to come back and play it, you charge more and it costs you less. It's a win-win in theory, but you're still going to have people mad because in terms of new games, there's not as many. Why is that though? Probably because newer games take forever to get made. Again, like most obvious thing ever, I know, but again, right, look at Sony. It takes the majority of their entire development studios 5 years on average to release a single game. It just takes too long. It means most of their first-party studios, if they're operating on all sides perfectly, can maybe at best release 2 games per console generation. Some studios like a Naughty Dog are only going to get maybe a single actual new game out like an Intergalactic for the entire PS5 generation. It just isn't really ideal, I know that, but it's because everything has to be huge and look like real life in Sony's case. But in reality, I think that graphics have progressed to such a point that I gotta ask you guys, man, do we really care about anything being more graphically impressive these days? Like, be serious, do we? Like, if you ask me, The Last of Us Part 2 still looks amazing. Story, not really, but graphically, yeah, it's very nice. But to be honest, I'd rather have more frequent games that don't feel like they need to animate every wrinkle on someone's face if I gotta be real. There's one game that did get announced that perfectly encapsulates the current everything meta today, which is Final Fantasy Resonance. So I made a video last year about my favorite game of the year, which was Octopath Traveler 0. That game was a mobile game first. Then Square Enix turned that into a single player game, and it was awesome. Resonance is the same idea, and funnily enough, they used the exact game I said they should use for a new title, so in case you don't know. Resonance is a single player HD 2D Final Fantasy game coming out on everything in October this year. It's also a reimagined version of the mobile game Brave Exvius, and Square Enix took that game and its massive amount of content and repurposed it into a single player game as you're seeing on screen here. Apparently, Resonance will be the entirety of Season 1 of Brave Exvius' content. From what I understand, that is an ungodly amount of content that is being shoved into a single game here. And it's all going to be placed into a neat single player RPG that you can now play. And again, Resonance is, in my opinion, the new meta you will be seeing more often going forward. Companies have so many mobile game spin-offs of all sorts of franchises, many of which had their end of service already. But just leaving all that content to rot somewhere is pointless. It makes total sense to take these huge mobile games content and turn them into viable single-player products instead. And I guarantee you that Final Fantasy Resonance will make Square Enix more money than whatever it took to develop the title. In a similar fashion, how the Ocarina of Time remake will also make Nintendo boatloads of money, and they will recoup their costs almost immediately because, again, it's a remake. And that's another thing about Nintendo and Sony's current priorities, because again, I look at Sony and I sigh harder every single time I look at it. Because even when Sony decides what to remake these days, they seem to be tone deaf and just keep choosing the wrong games, in my opinion. Like, explain to me why Horizon Zero Dawn, which came out in 2017, has a full-blown remake already, why Last of Us Part 1 is already remade too. Yet there's plenty of Sony first-party titles I'd rather actually see brought back that aren't even available to play natively on Sony's current hardware. Good example of this, Infamous. That would be a great remake. A remake of Resistance would be appreciated too. But instead, Sony keeps remaking games people already played via remasters, or in Horizon's case, was totally unnecessary. It just feels like for me, as someone who enjoys Sony and Nintendo games, that I constantly look at Sony and I just kind of get confused. Like, they're being led by someone who clearly doesn't know what people want or something. Why isn't Bloodborne remastered already? Yeah, we know the God of War Grease trilogy is getting remade right now, but knowing current Sony, those remakes will probably remove certain parts of the game, and you know what I'm talking about because they'll be seen as problematic. Which in turn makes you wonder, well, why remake the game then if you're just going to remove the edge from them and make them less in a sense? You know the whole point people like God of War to begin with. It is just frustrating. It's like the blueprint is there, we see it, it's on the desk, there's a giant arrow pointing at it, and Sony's kind of looking at it going, yeah, we don't need to do that. Yeah, they don't want Infamous or Resistance. No, they want Horizon, but this time it's Lego now. Ah, yes. Who could have guessed the children of today would want a Lego game of Horizon of all things? Never mind making what people actually want. We're just going to remake Horizon just a few years after release. They'll probably remake Forbidden West next, because why? Why not? But stop asking about Bloodborne. We know you want it, but you're never going to get it. It's just bizarre to me. It's why I'm so frustrated with Sony. At least Nintendo, to some capacity, is giving people reasons to want to buy their hardware in the first place. Whether they can afford said hardware due to price hikes, that's another story, but the point still remains at least that if you buy a Switch 2, there's actual Switch 2 only games to play on the thing. The same can't really be said on PlayStation for the most part. There's barely a reason to own one, and that's coming from someone like me. That's just sad to hear for myself to say out loud. The whole thing just sounds like dumb hubris to me. Companies like Sony and Xbox, they thought games would exist everywhere and hardware wouldn't really matter in the future. But all that does is make exclusive hardware less relevant, because now the ecosystem these companies had built over years would become less relevant in the long run. These companies, of course, they learned the hard way, and the lesson taught was painful, to say the least. People, unsurprisingly, buy hardware for games. Duh, I know. Not ecosystems or promises of the future, but games, actual games. When Nintendo launches a new Super Mario or a Zelda, people care, because they aren't just games in a sense. Those are system sellers. They're the whole reason why you're on that platform ecosystem in the first place, and the rest of the industry is increasingly realizing how valuable that really is, despite doing their hardest to change your minds on it. And Sony used to understand this at a similar level to Nintendo's. The PlayStation brand as a whole, it was at one time built on exclusives, I guess, like God of War, Uncharted, Last of Us, Tsushima, Ratchet & Clank. The games, they made didn't exist for only revenue. They existed to create an identity for PlayStation. People in the PS1, 2, 3, and 4 eras knew exactly why they owned a PlayStation. To play PlayStation games, obviously. Today, though, that got ruined by Sony's leadership this generation. We can't deny it. Even though Sony is somewhat returned to exclusives, I guess, going forward, this ultimately still doesn't matter either if we're only getting an exclusive like once in a blue moon. It's not enough. It's not because Sony doesn't have the talent or the studio manpower, it's because their development timelines have become absurd. 5 to 7 years is the average per game to get made now. Entire console generations beginning to pass before franchises even receive a sequel game. That's a serious problem because people can't remain excited forever. At some point, the anticipation for a game is going to turn into frustration. Just go ask everybody who waited for Metroid Prime 4 what they thought once they got that game after they waited so long for it. The truth is that the modern AAA development pipeline, it's unsustainable. Even outside of Sony, it's crazy. Did you know that currently there are more people working on that Witcher 3 expansion, Songs of the Past, that they just announced, than there were entire developers of CD Projekt Red when they made Witcher 3 originally? The dev sizes of these companies have reached Muso Battle Dynasty Warriors levels. They're spending hundreds of millions of dollars with huge teams, and even then success isn't guaranteed. Well, Witcher 3's expansion will do well at least, but think about how insane that still actually is. imagine spending 5 to 7 years making one game, hoping that it succeeds. And that if it doesn't, that one failure could wipe out everything you've ever made in an instant. One bad release can throw an entire company into chaos. That's not stability. That like the larger the budget, the more dire it gets now. Nintendo, on the other hand, is operating seemingly in a completely different universe than Sony or Microsoft is. Their games don't require every blade of grass to have individual physics. Their developers aren't obsessed with photorealism. Sure, Super Mario games are fun, but I can't see the Peach Fuzz if I zoom in on his face, so what's the point? Okay, but who cares, right? Is the game fun? Does it run well? People caring that they can see every mole on some character's face is why every game takes an entire generation to come out now. I personally couldn't care less about that stuff. Nintendo, unlike Sony at least, isn't chasing Hollywood production values seemingly all of the time. And again, Nintendo isn't perfect, I know that, but could Sony learn from what they're doing? Oh yeah, totally. Because of how Nintendo makes their games, not only are they cheaper made, they can release them more consistently too. And the result is a steady flow of exclusives down the pipeline. That's a clear identity. And that's a fan base that now knows what they're getting, again, if they can afford the console, that is, or the games too, I guess, because the economy's out of whack. It's not that Nintendo doesn't make mistakes, okay, I know they do. It's that Nintendo at least seems far less interested in joining the, I guess, technological arms race that's consuming pretty much all of AAA these days. Xbox, on the other hand, they face different challenges, right? They acquired way too many studios. They expanded their portfolio, sure, but they also invested more money into buying just Activision Blizzard than Nintendo will probably invest in like all of their game development for the next 50 years or so of releases. Again, the money being spent is not making the dent they think that it will. Everything just takes too long. You know how long it's been since Elder Scrolls 6 was announced? Take a guess. Take a second and guess. How many years has it been before Elder Scrolls 6 got announced? Don't look it up either. Take a guess and comment below. Are you ready for the answer? It's been 8 years. I know. 8 years, dude. Where's the game? Nowhere to be found yet. That is stupid. 2018, dude. That's when they announced Elder Scrolls 6. In 2018. I was a different person when that game got announced originally, man. You see, it's not just a Sony problem. It's pretty much everybody. The entire AAA ecosystem has become unsustainable mostly. They got bigger budgets and teams, but not really better results, do they? This is why we're seeing what we're seeing, especially during all of these showcases like Summer Games Fest and more. The industry, as a whole, is beginning to rediscover something that it should have probably never forgot in the first place, which is that exclusives matter. Your identity to your platform is paramount. Creative vision will always outdo how many pores on some character's face you can see. And most importantly, shipping actual completed games matters a lot too. Players, consumers, whatever you want to call us, we don't reward potential. We reward things when we can actually finally play them. The companies that consistently deliver compelling experiences will always have an advantage over those that are endlessly promising future greatness. Nintendo understands this at least. Increasingly, Sony and Xbox are being forced to relearn this, and that is a problem if you're like me and play on PS5 primarily. Because why do I have 3 console exclusives, Sony? It's been 6 years. What are we doing over there? So the gaming industry chased the impossible, and now they're facing the consequences. These development cycles are spiraling, and your costs, they are imploding. And this is why so many companies are struggling to maintain the pace that they used to have. Meanwhile, Nintendo's over here doing pretty much what they've always done. I guarantee you that most of Nintendo's first-party games budget-wise combined are maybe equivalent to maybe a single Sony first-party games budget and then some. This can't be how we keep doing things, man. It just can't be. We want games we actually want to play. Don't show me a trailer and then ghost me for 8 years. That's not cool. You're not Batman. Stop disappearing when people talk to you mid-sentence, Elder Scrolls 6. Look, the future of gaming as a whole is not going to belong to the companies with the biggest budgets. It will belong to those who can actually consistently deliver great experiences without needing a whole decade just to do it. And right now, that's a lesson that much of the AAA industry desperately needs to learn these days. Maybe bigger isn't always better. Companies may have thought we wanted that, but here's the question that nobody in the C-suite over there is really ever going to ask themselves, which is, well, did we as players actually ask for that? Did we? Because let's be real. When you look at objectively the most successful games of the past decade, what do you notice about all of them? Many of them are not technological showcases, right? Minecraft, Fortnite, Roblox, Among Us, Helldivers, Nintendo's entire first-party lineup. Like, what what are they instead, right? Oh, okay, of course, yeah, they're gameplay showcases instead. It's like the audience repeatedly tells the industry what we value, yet they just ignore it instead. AAA executives, they became obsessed with creating the gaming equivalent of Hollywood blockbusters, not realizing that video games are not Hollywood. That's why they're two separate industries, you dummies. Oh, but we need our own Avengers Endgame level game budget and size-wise, or maybe, and this is crazy, but maybe, you should take the budget of an Avengers Endgame level game and make 10 games for cheaper that are gameplay focused over, here's Jack Quaid wearing a styrofoam cube because he's the cube in God of War Laufey. Isn't that cool? Don't you love Jack Quaid? He was in The Boys. We don't care about Hollywood actors. I don't hate Jack Quaid, no offense to him. But seriously, no wonder these games cost so much. Like Exodus has Matthew McConaughey in it. I mean, cool? I guess. But imagine how much cooler your game would be if we didn't spend, I don't know, $5 million so McConaughey will speak in our game, but put that into the gameplay systems instead. Nintendo's still out here selling games without voice acting and still making money over fists. Sony instead thinks every game needs their cutting edge technology to exist. But they never really stop to think to make their games have cutting edge gameplay, do they? Oh look, it's another third-person action game of some variety that will talk down to me. Please stand still as Kratos speaks to somebody for 3 minutes as you stand there doing nothing, just looking at the environment because the game won't let you play it. Cool, but here's Super Mario. He just yells wahoo, and then he eats a mushroom. Guess which game is going to be more fun to play and which one's going to have more replay value? Would I trade Kratos standing there talking to someone all the time if it meant I got more Kratos games faster where he instead fought monsters and the gameplay was king again over constantly trying to make something so Jeff Keighley will give us awards made in a factory? Yes, absolutely I would. Oh wow, the graphics improved. Too bad our release schedule collapsed, but it's okay because we got a gold statue for making one game for every 5 to 7 years, so it's worth it. This is why momentum is everything. Older generations of games, you had multiple entries within a single franchise within a single console cycle. Developers could take risks and make cool things. You can't anymore because the economics of development have punished the concept of experimentation. Ultimately, because Nintendo doesn't do what the rest do, not only do their games come out more regularly, but because they prioritize art styles over graphics, ironically, and let's be real, their games are going to look less dated over time than Sony's or Microsoft's ever will. Cool art styles age gracefully, the gameplay remains king, the development burden stays manageable, but don't worry. I'm sure the next 5 Sony third-person action games that will take them 20 years to produce will they'll be good, guys, don't worry, trust. Just ignore the fact that Nintendo will probably release like 30 to 50 games in that same time frame. And in like 100 years when we're all dust, those Super Mario games are going to look timeless while everyone will say that Kratos or Atsu and Ghost of Yote look like they aged like milk. I'm tired, man. It's all so tiresome, but what do you think? Let me know. I'm not saying any one company is the best, they all got problems, but either way, this is a disaster of their own making. Stop prioritizing things that don't matter. I don't care if I can see the individual hairs on Kratos' nipples. For the love of God, just make games that are fun to play. I don't want to be 70 years old by the time the next God of War trilogy is done, or 2 games, so they're not even doing trilogies anymore. But what do you think? Let me know. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want to. See you next time. And you see, Nintendo doesn't care about showing you the hairs on Mario's body. That is why their games come out more often. I should have just said that. That's the entire video, pretty much. Oh well.